Kia ora koutou katoa ka mihi nui ki a koutou. My name's Justin Duckworth. I'm the Bishop of Wellington, the Anglican Bishop of Wellington, but primarily I'm just a follower of Jesus who it's my privilege to get to oversee a few churches. I feel really humbled to be asked by the Justice Conference to bring their closing address. I feel like primarily I'm just a follower of Jesus who every now and then finds God calling me and leading me to be involved in issues of justice. I grew up in the 80s and became a follower of Jesus in the 80s, and I remember in my young evangelical charismatic days we would sit around a lot and talk about end times. I probably, those you can remember, I probably consumed one too many Frank Peretti books, could smell the sulphur in the air, and I remember dining out on hearing Barry Smith bring end times talk, and we're obsessed with end times. I find it very strange at this point in history, as we near the end of 2020, how the reality is as if any time in history, I feel like we're in the end times now. But funny, nobody talks about the end times anymore. I'm just so mindful that we find ourselves in this moment in history with climate change, human-induced climate change ramping up, the world dramatically looking to be impacted by that. Obviously there's climate deniers, etc., but I think we more and more are seeing the reality of this human-induced climate change and that issue completely spiralling out of control. And we live in COVID-19. In New Zealand, we've been blessed. We've been blessed by how well we have managed it, but across the world we're watching the carnage of COVID-19, and our world is fundamentally different than it was this time last year. And then we've also got these intense justice movements that constantly rocking our world. I'm thinking of the Me Too movement, and then the Black Lives Matters movement, and then I'm thinking of this also though, watching this political extremism that's playing out before our very eyes around the world. I don't know about you, but I was impacted the other day when I watched this video of this Black Lives Matters march in the United States, and then this right-wing militia turn up with guns, and this left-wing militia turns up with guns, and then I hear in the commentary to the militia by their overseers saying, you know, do not point your guns at anybody. Do not point your guns at anybody. If somebody points their gun at you, do not shoot, just kill them. And I'm like horrified. We've got the left and the right turning up at a protest armed, ready to shoot anybody who points a gun. And I was like, how have we got here? And in this place of of climate change, COVID, Me Too, Black Lives Matters, extreme political extremism. And then I've got to say, what does that mean for the church? And the challenge I have, if I'm really honest, is I'm taken back to a quote that used to be said about the Church of England back in the day. It used to say the Church of England was the Tory party at prayer. Now, I don't think it's a true rendition. The Tory part might be the prayer, but maybe on a good day. And so we had this idea that the Church of England, the Anglican Church, originally was kind of aligned to a political way of life. And I think basically when I go around New Zealand and talk to Christians and talk to church leaders, what surprises me is you show me primarily their political sub-tribe, and I will tell you what they think on a justice issue. And then they will justify it in reference to the gospel, but primarily it seems to me that they are reflecting the political groups that they're part of more than reflecting what Jesus is actually saying to them. Now, I find this deeply challenging. Actually, I tell you when I really wake up. I really wake up when I meet a church leader or a Christian and they say a particular justice view which is counter to their church or counter to what their friends are saying. At that point, I really listen, because somebody is thinking differently here. Somebody might just be really taking the lordship of Christ very seriously. So I think it's fundamental that as followers of Jesus, we take our reference point for justice from the King of Kings, not from wider society. I was deeply disturbed during lockdown. During lockdown, my wife Jenny showed me this advert, and it was an advert from Heineken beer. It was a brewery advert. And in this brewery advert, I was deeply shaken because I actually was so depressed that this was from a brewery and not the church. There was this lovely advert, you can Google it, it's a Heineken advert, it's called Open Your World. So I asked you to Google it. Be really careful though, remember the Bishop of Wellington didn't just tell you to Google a beer advert, that wasn't me. So in this advert, you've got two random strangers who each hold extremely different political views on a justice issue. So one might be an extreme feminist, and one's view is feminism is basically man-hating, etc. And both these people, before the advert starts, they record their views, their political views, their extremely different views on video. Nobody sees it other than themselves recording that. Then they are invited into this room and they meet each other for the first time, knowing nothing about the other person, just meeting a random stranger. And then they embark on these series of activities. And the activities are really quite fun because ultimately they end up building a bar together. And on the way of building a bar together, they engage in conversations like, what do they have in common? How would you describe yourself? So they get to know each other and they do a common task together. And then near the end of this advert, what happens is somebody breaks out two beers and places them on the bar. And then they ask the participants to stand and watch a video screen. And on that video screen, while they're standing next to each other, the video that they made before they engaged in this activity, each individually made, was shown. So one person says, you know, I'm a feminist, this is what it means to me, this I can't stand, you know, smash the patriarchy. And then the other person's video show where they're saying they can't stand feminists, etc., etc. And they're standing next to each other. And then after they've seen each other's political views played out on the big screen, then there's a voiceover that says, you can choose. You can just sit and discuss your differences and have a beer together, or you can leave the room now, your choice. And what is wonderful is to watch these two people with completely different ideologies, completely different understandings of the world, choose to sit down and have a beer together and actually listen to each other and continue to form their relationship. It is just this beautiful, beautiful advert. And the tragedy is, why do we need a brewery to give us the best insight in how we should be as the church? The church should be the one place, whereas the world is crying out for some solutions to this incredibly divisiveness, the church should be the one place where people with difference can sit down and hear the other person, stop demonizing the other, but listen to the other person and hear their story and be open to change and transformation. My deep hope is that churches learn to not, it's not even that we talk past each other in the church, we shout past each other in the church. And my deep hope is that we as the church can be the place where, in a world crying out for people to be actually able to listen and to engage in the issues in an appropriate way, that we as a church can role model that. Just recently, a friend was talking to me, and the friend was relatively new to the Anglican Church, and said to me, what do you think is the most greatest moment that you can remember in the Anglican Church where you were just so proud? Now, I kind of got to admit, I struggled to answer the question initially, because, you know, I'm the sort of person who maybe sees the glass half empty, and I can always see how we can improve things. So this person wanting to know the greatest moment when I really felt like the church, the Anglican Church, was really onto it. And I was really a bit embarrassed actually, because I couldn't give an answer straight away, and I was thinking, oh help. So I changed the topic and changed the conversation. But then a couple of minutes later, suddenly I just thought, oh no, I know. It was 2018 when we gathered as our sort of governance group of the Anglican Church across the country. And in that gathering, we decided that on the issue of blessing same-sex relationships, that although we were part of a church with incredibly different views, that both sides believed were biblical, we decided that we could actually stay together, be in the room, and actually appreciate the different perspective, and that we didn't need to break fellowship. We thought we could work together for the kingdom, we could listen to difference, and we could be together and break bread. For me, I'm not telling you what I theologically, personally think on the issue. For me, what's really important is, as a church, we took what has been an issue which is a deeply divisive across the world in many, many churches, and we managed to look at it straight on. And on the whole, there were a few exceptions, but on the whole, we managed to say we want to still see Christ in each other and stay in the room together. As I come into land then, I want to now move on. I've talked about the fact that I think the great gift at this point in history is for the church to learn to hold the diverse views amongst itself and actually learn to listen to each other. I want to now go to what I think is three theological things we find in Scripture that I feel like should be informing our struggle for justice. Because I feel like often, like when I first became a Christian in the 80s, we used to sing really interesting Christian choruses in the 80s, and one of them was a children's song that talked about Jesus being the way, truth and life. And I think often we forget that Jesus in his way on earth actually should inform how we go about fighting for justice and change in this world. So three ways I think the life of Jesus should inform us. The first is this: in Luke 23, as Jesus is going to the cross, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Now, here's Jesus, who we know is sinless. If anybody has the right to retribution and vengeance, it is Jesus. But instead, Jesus on the way to the cross says, "Forgive them, they know not what they do." Jesus refuses to put blame on those who ultimately kill him. I feel like as followers of Jesus, we've lost sight of this point. That often the very people who oppose us, they are still made in the image of God. And we need to see them not as our opposition, but as a fellow person made in the image of God, and stop creating the world into goodies and baddies. The goodies obviously believe what I think in justice issues, and the baddies, well, that we need to relatively smite them. I'm deeply impacted by the life of Gandhi, and I remember a story I read many years ago. So again, I'm going back in my memory. So this story probably only loosely correlates to what actually happened. So Gandhi used to reside early in his life, early in his work for transformation. He resided in South Africa, and in South Africa, as he's working for significant change to the system there around racial inequality, his arch rival was General Jan Smuts, who ended up being the Prime Minister of South Africa. And there's this recorded meeting between the two of them when General Jan Smuts asks Gandhi, why have you come to see me, and what are you about? And Gandhi says, well, I've come to tell you that I'm going to work to see this country change and see this injustice transformed. And General Jan Smuts says, and how are you going to do that, Gandhi? And Gandhi said, with your help. And history would show that that was actually true, that ultimately General Jan Smuts in time was transformed and changed his view. Gandhi could have the foresight to see that his arch rival could in time be the ally he needed. And I feel like as followers of Jesus, we need to be really careful not to create the world as the goodies and baddies and therefore demonize the other, but actually instead see the other as created by God, and therefore potentially as we work with them, as we talk with them, maybe together we can see this transformation come. The second thing I think Christians need to keep sight of is the basis of our Christian faith is how did Jesus change the world? Well, Jesus has changed the world, it seems, by laying his life down. We know that he had that opportunity, it says, to call down legions of angels to bring his kingdom by force. But the gospel is really clear. Jesus instead brought his kingdom by redemptive suffering, by being willing to pay the price for his kingdom to come, to pay the price for the justice that he wanted to see, to pay the price to heal the world. What I notice often, and what I see in my own life as a follower of Jesus, is often as I engage in global and local justice issues, often I'm choosing issues where I'm pointing the finger and saying those people over there need to change, and it's not costly for me. I think followers of Jesus should primarily be choosing issues where they themselves are paying the highest price to see the transformation come, as opposed to pointing the finger at others and asking them to pay the price. We should be the ones who are role modeling and paying the greatest price, as opposed to telling society off and asking society to pay the price for what we believe. Now, I think it's a fundamental point of Scripture that the kingdom comes through redemptive suffering. Justice comes on earth through redemptive suffering, and we need to be the people who embrace that redemptive suffering. Our church needs to be the people who embrace that redemptive suffering, not the people who tell others to change. The third thing I think we've lost sight of is in Ephesians 6, it says our fight, our wrestle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. I think we no longer have this conversation. We think our enemy is some extreme political figure who we need to work to change or work to pull them down. But that is not the enemy. They're just a person made in God's image. The enemy are the principalities and powers. And I don't think we spend any time, left or right, really analysing what does it mean for that, for our wrestle not to be with flesh and blood, but to be against principalities and powers. The flesh and blood are made in God's image. The principalities and powers, we need to see them come under Christ's lordship so justice comes on this earth. I feel like the conversation around what does principalities and powers mean as we wrestle for justice, I find that conversation doesn't seem to take place anywhere in the Christian community, really. So 3 thoughts as we as a church become the place where we can have those diverse conversations and hold those conversations, hold that difference, so we can be the community that role models difference. But then 3 theological things. 1, forgive them for they know not what they do. Let's not demonise the other. Let's not create winners, goodies and baddies. Let's instead realise that the person who maybe thinks differently on us potentially is the very person God will use to transform this. Secondly, let's be the people who don't ask others to change, but we ourselves pay the price. We ourselves be the community of faith who is willing to suffer and pay the price for the justice issues. Let's not ask everybody else to pay our price. Let's us be the people who follow our Saviour and pay the price. And third, let's realise and let's reimagine and rethink what does it mean to wrestle against principalities and powers that are all over this world, that is all over climate change, all over COVID, all over Black Lives Matters, Me Too, political extremism, all over these things. What does it mean? What does it mean to engage with the principalities and powers over racism? And what does it mean for us in our country at this time in history as well? Just again, we're coming to land to say thank you so much for the privilege of just being with you today. And as every time I talk, I've got to be honest, primarily I'm just preaching to myself. So if you happen to get anything out of it, that's a bonus. For me, this is stuff that I need to hear afresh today. Kia ora koutou katoa.